The bladed jig is one versatile bait, but to get the most out of it, there's two things that we must look for. We know that lots and lots of anglers fish a bladed jig on a straight swimming type of a retrieve. It catches fish that way, and I've fished it that way a lot myself. But to get the most out of this lure, I have found that fishing it like a traditional jig is much more efficient and gets me a whole lot more bites. But there's two things that we have to consider. One, how soon will that blade kick in when it starts moving? And two is how slow can we work the bait and keep that blade vibrating? Two critically important factors that are often overlooked. What I mean as far as overlooked is that bladed jig may move 6, 7, 8 inches before the blade kicks in. And that initial startup phase, whether it's 6 inches, a foot, 1 inch, whatever, that is so critical to how efficient the lure works and how likely we are to get a strike on a bladed jig. And if the jigs that you are using, the chatterbait style lures that you are using, meet these two criteria, then you have just opened up a huge window of possibilities of not only where you can fish this lure, but how you can fish it, and that's going to get you more bites in more situations. Now, I filmed this little segment right here in 120 frames per second, then took it into post-production and slowed it down to 24 frames per second. And if you take a look right here, you can see that basically instantly that blade starts to move when I pull the lure. So important. So that's blade startup on the initial movement of the lure. Now, what about how slow can you reel this particular bait? When we can reel it as slow as possible, and I often like to compare it to slow rolling a spinner bait, wow, that just gives us the ability to make great bottom contact, come over cover, limbs, through weeds, all kinds of stuff. And if we can keep that blade going just ever so slightly and reel it as slow as possible, it just creates a whole new world of opportunity, like I said before. Now, there's a couple ways that you can do this. If you've got a really silty and just a mucky bottom, like I do right here, you're probably going to have to use some small hops, that initial pop of the lure to clear off any debris and get that blade to go. But if you're fishing a cleaner bottom composition, rock, pea gravel, sand, maybe some in rivers where you got more of a shell bed type of a situation, you should be able just to start to reel it very slowly, and that blade is going to kick in. That's what you're looking for. This lure deserves so much more credit than just this dirty water, muddy water, ultra loud, vibrating type of bait. And of course it works in those situations. But I find in clearer water or slightly stained water that sometimes too much vibration can definitely turn the fish off. We have to remember, in a dirtier water situation, those lateral lines are key. They need that vibration to zone in on where that bait is. But when you've got really clear water, or even water that's got a slight stain to it, all of a sudden that sense of sight, so in muddy water we got vibration and sight, but all of a sudden in a little cleaner water, those two senses start to equal out, and the bass become more of a visual type of a predator. It's in those situations that I find too much rattle is not a good thing. As a matter of fact, my jigs that I often like to use in really clear water situations have no rattles on them whatsoever. Just the lure banging around into stuff, you know, hitting a rock, hitting stump, ripping through weeds is enough commotion to get that lateral line activated, and then they start to look for it. So in clearer water situations, that is where these slow reeling retrieves and small hops with a bladed jig just open up the world for you. I just did a video about not getting stuck in that in-between place as anglers as far as our retrieves and how we present our lures. So if you'd like to check that one out, here it is right here. And make sure to go out and encourage someone today. You never know how you might just change their life. For the Bass Fishing Life, I'm your host, Steve Rogers.